Thank you for watching Scary Bear Attacks. If you like this episode, please remember to hit the like button and leave a comment or two, then subscribe and click on the bell to receive notifications of whenever we release new videos. Also, please remember to share them to your social media. Welcome back to Scary Bear Attacks. Today's episode takes us to the beautiful and rugged mountains of West Virginia to a ridge called Cheat Mountain. This mountain is one of the highest ridges in the Monongahela National Forest, reaching heights of around 4,800 feet. It is covered with forests of spruce trees and various hardwoods. A century ago, all but a few hundred acres of West Virginia was logged, leaving very little old-growth forest. But what is there is near the Cheat River. The out-of-control logging created patches of what are called second and third growth forests. If you recall, in previous videos on our channel, we have talked about forest succession, which starts when the land is cleared through fire, landslide, or logging. The first plants that return are grasses and small bushes, and is considered the first growth. This stage is followed by larger bushes and small trees, which is considered the second growth. It is frequently low visibility and extremely difficult to get through, with all of the smaller plants and trees intertwining in competition for resources. As the small trees turn into larger trees over decades, the resource demand and shade they cast on the ground with their canopies shape the pockets of brush and the number of young trees in any given area. At this point in succession, the mature forest has returned and is the most navigable by humans of any other state of forest succession. The impact of such rapid and heavy logging activity devastated wildlife, and only recently is the area recovering. Much of the state would now be considered to be second and third growth forest. There are only a few species affected by the excessive logging activity still on the endangered species list, including the West Virginia Flying Squirrel and the Cheat Mountain Salamander. Beyond the timber management issues, West Virginia is the only state in the U.S. that has a year-round bear pursuit season. That means that houndsmen can turn their dogs loose on a bear scent trail at any point in the year and chase them until they are treed. After that, they are required to regain control and possession of their hounds, allowing the bear to climb back down the tree and go back to being a bear. On August 2, 2007, half-brothers Phil Probst and Willie Starks rose at 5 a.m. They had been preparing to take their hounds out for a run on a bear scent trail, which was one of their favorite pastimes. They enjoyed it so much that they would take the hounds out a few times a week, some weeks. In West Virginia, bear take season is only a month long in the area where the brothers lived, and the bears here can be 600 pounds on rare occasions. The brothers had a pack of hounds that included a few different breeds. They had red-bone hounds, walkers, mountain curs, and black and tans in their hound pack, and had painstakingly built their pack over the past several years. The brothers had started their hound pack for hunting raccoons in their childhood, with their father initially. As they got older, they hunted raccoons together, then fell in with a group of houndsmen who pursued bears. They enjoyed the pursuit so much that they eventually gave up killing the bears and focused on the pursuit season only. Phil became so enamored with pursuing the bears that he stopped carrying a firearm with him and clearly didn't carry bear spray. He explained the logic behind this decision by stating that you don't have to kill anything if you get into a spot. You have to figure out a way to get your hounds controlled and removed without shooting and killing the bear. For some reason, that sounds like West Virginia logic, but is definitely beyond my comprehension. Phil and Willie loaded up 10 of their 12 hounds and made the drive up U.S. Highway 250 toward Cheat Mountain summit. When they arrived at the turnoff that goes to Godneer Knob Fire Tower, they took their hound with the best nose and chained him to the top of the kennel, mounted in the back of their truck. Their usual practice is to slowly drive down the road, allowing the dog on the top of the kennel, called a strike dog, to get a great position to sniff the air as they went. They crept their way down the road and hadn't gone far before one of the hounds bayed out to tell the brothers it had picked up a bear's scent near the road. Phil and Willie got out and pulled 2 of the dogs from the kennel and let them work to find the trail. Once the 2 dogs had found the bear's scent trail, the brothers turned out the rest of the pack. The hunt was on. As Phil and Willie listened to the baying hounds racing through the brush, their ruckus told a story of the pursuit. They listened as the hounds crossed the hills and turned back toward the highway they had just left. Looking back down the road, they could see the bear streak across the same road they were on, and up the hill in a large circular path as it fled the mayhem of the hounds behind it. The bear was a good-sized bear at what they guessed to be close to 250 pounds, but was no 600-pound giant. It should give the hounds a great chase. The size of the bear's head led the men to conclude that it was a male, which meant that it was probably going to run a long way before treeing. Male bears are bigger and tend to attack hounds more often than female bears do, and that isn't exactly the best scenario for houndsmen and their hounds. The brothers listened as the hounds continued to bay and could tell the bear had run right into a part of the ridge crowded with dense second-growth forest full of short trees and bushes that grow closely together, creating a hedgerow of tangled plant life. It is very difficult to see through and even more difficult to get through. The trees and bushes on the hillside were so thick and tangled that Phil had a hard time making progress toward his hounds. After much effort, he finally emerged into the spruce section of the forest. He could hear the hounds baying once again and was sure they were barking as if they had treed the bear. As Phil stepped out into a recent clear-cut, he could see two very large boulders towering over everything around them. He could see the bear standing on top of one of the boulders, having found temporary sanctuary from the hounds there. The bear was growling and snarling at the hounds from atop the boulder, but suddenly glanced up toward Phil. As soon as it saw him, it jumped off the boulder in his direction back into the thick brush. The brush completely obscured the exact location of the big bear, but the sounds of a fight between the bear and the hounds filled the air. The sounds were not good sounds. Phil could hear by the yelping and wailing of his hounds that the bear was trying to kill them as opposed to running away. He knew that an angry bear would kill several of his dogs in no time. As Phil got closer, he could see the hounds had pursued the bear into a funnel-shaped rock formation. He couldn't see the hounds or the bear, but read the terrain to discern what was happening. He could hear the hounds yelping and wailing and knew he had to pull them off so that the bear would leave before the hounds were killed. Phil quickly positioned himself in the opening of the funnel and approached from one side, hoping the bear would run out the other side. He could see the bear begin to move toward the opening on the far side of the funnel, and Phil dropped off a rock, pushing his way through to the brush toward his hounds. Phil bent over and stretched out his hand to take control of the first one of his hounds he found. As he glanced up, he could see the furious black bear with its mouth wide open running directly at him. The bear had doubled back, and probably in anger at the hounds, decided that the funnel rock formation that trapped him also trapped Phil and the hounds. Phil was still on all fours, trying to gain control of his hound, when the bear slammed into him and knocked him rolling onto his back. Phil could hear the bear growling and was terrified by the thought of being bitten by it. He raised his hands toward his face to fend off the bear's jaws and screamed as he kicked his legs at the bear in desperate self-defense. The angry bear quickly straddled him and began chewing on his hands as they were extended to push the bear away. Phil could feel the bear's teeth crunching through the flesh and bone of his hands, with bites occurring in rapid succession, causing pain to shoot through his body. Time seemed to slow down and lag, as is so common in these tense and terrifying situations. Imagine watching the bear's mouth open much slower than it is really happening and crunching through your hand, and you will understand what Phil was experiencing. Hearing Phil's screams, his hounds leapt from the boulders, landing on top of the bear, who was on top of Phil. This caused the bear to let go of Phil and flee the hounds, who followed in hot pursuit. Phil took the break in the attack to roll over to his stomach. He tried to push himself to his feet, but couldn't. His hands simply refused to work. He looked down at his right hand to see the flesh completely torn away and only connected to him by a thin flap of skin. His left hand wouldn't work at all, and he could see puncture marks from the bear's canines that penetrated completely through his palm. He knew the teeth must have cut some of the tendons, causing the loss of function. His hands now mutilated and non-functional, Phil reached for his two-way radio. He knew he had to get Willie up here to help him get through the tangle of the second-growth forest he fought through on his way in, as it would be too difficult by himself. His hands were so mangled that he couldn't work the buttons and dials to get a hold of Willie. The only thing Phil could do was yell, and he did that for about 15 minutes. Willie piped up and pushed his way through the brush toward his brother. Willie pulled Phil's shirt off and wrapped it around his brother's mangled hands. The men agreed that Phil's injuries were serious but not life-threatening. Willie grabbed his brother's radio and reached out to their friend, Gary Arbogast. He agreed to pick Phil up and take him to the hospital while Willie rounded up the hounds. Phil's injuries were bandaged enough to allow him to push his way back through the tangled brush for a mile and a half back to Highway 250. His hands hurt so much that he couldn't even jog where he was able to. When he emerged from the forest and onto the highway, Arbogast was there waiting for him. They reached out to a police officer, who escorted them to the hospital at Elkins. With the officer's escort, the 40-mile distance was covered in 35 minutes. Once at the hospital, initial examinations of Phil's injuries revealed them to be much more serious than initially believed. After the medical team cleared the injuries and punctures in Phil's flesh from debris, they x-rayed his left wrist. The images revealed that the bones of his wrist and all of the bones composing the palm of his hand were broken. As Phil stood near the nurses, he felt something wet trickling down his right thigh. The nurses investigated to find a bite wound that he must have received while he was kicking at the bear. This wound alone took 12 stitches to close. Phil was laid on a gurney and wheeled into surgery to receive pins in his left wrist and his last 2 hand bones. While he was under anesthesia, the separated flesh of his right hand was sewn back on. The only repair they couldn't make to his right hand was to fix the nerve to his little finger, which was severed when the bear bit the flesh from the outside portion of his hand. It's likely that he will never again have the use of his little finger on his right hand. Phil Probst is undeterred by the confrontation he had with the big black bear. He couldn't even wait for 1 week after being discharged before he took his hounds back out and was chasing bears once again. He had a big bandage on his right hand and his left arm was still in a sling, but was happy to be doing what he loved so much. After some reflection on his altercation with the bear, Phil says the attack was his fault, citing the fact that he crawled into the brush very near to the bear without an easy escape. He placed himself in an unavoidably hostile and dangerous position. He admits that his dogs had wound the bear up so much that he felt he had to defend himself when he attacked Phil. Phil admits that by climbing into the funnel, he blocked the bear's only way to get out. The only regret he has about his bear attack is that the bear bit so doggone hard. He didn't have to do that part. In West Virginia, Phil Probst's black bear attack was the first recorded bear attack in state history. Given the aggravating circumstances surrounding this attack, I can hardly call it a bear attack. More like a human and dog attack on a bear who defended himself just enough to get away. After reviewing the details surrounding this episode, I am left with a few questions for you. Do you think West Virginia's year-round black bear pursuit season is why they have never had a bear attack? Do you think that a firearm would have changed the outcome of this attack? Would bear spray have prevented this attack? Can you believe Phil was out chasing bears with his hounds only a week after being discharged from the hospital? What impact do you think the widespread overlogging of West Virginia had on the wildlife? I will enjoy reading and responding to your thoughts, so please post them in the comments section below, and let's talk about it.
Thank you for watching Scary Bear Attacks. If you've enjoyed this episode, please consider clicking on the like button and clicking on the bell icon. We'll help you know when we post our new episodes. Posting our video links to your social media profiles furthers awareness, and it's fun. We slashed our prices in our merch store, linked below, so check out the bargains there while you shop. As a member of our human community, remember to adventure bravely and be careful out there, especially in bear country.